Introduction. The Carter administration repraised this country's foreign assistance strategy during the summer of 1977. Several months of intensive analysis and discussion resulted in the president's decision that our concessional assistance would focus primarily on meeting the basic human needs (BHN) of poor people. The low-income countries would continue to receive top priority, but middle-income countries would also be included if aid resources were available. The dominant factor in allocating aid among countries would be where it would do the most good to help poor people. This was a careful, deliberate decision. Considerable effort was devoted to defining basic needs, objectives, analyzing the key elements of LDC policies in pursuit of these objectives, drawing implications for donor support, and relating the new approach to more additional development objectives such as growth in GNP and employment and improved income distribution. The decision was not a radical departure, however, a rather a natural outgrowth of earlier approaches that modified traditional growth objectives to include an emphasis on employment and equity, including the U.S. bilateral development assistance legislation, with its stress on equitable development in key sectors such as rural development, agriculture, nutrition, population, health, and education. The growth with equity approach as formalized in the IBRD/Sussex volume Redistribution with Growth and the International Labor Office's work on employment strategies. Indeed, the first general presentation of the basic needs approach emerged at the ILO's 1976 World Employment Conference. By fall of 1977, the broad outlines and structure of a development strategy aimed at achieving BHN objectives had been developed. The DCC Foreign Assistance Study, which oriented strategy, was published. The DCC Foreign Assistance Study, which included an analysis of the essential components of a BHN-oriented strategy, was published. At the DAC high-level meeting in October, member governments issued a Statement on Development Cooperation for Economic Growth and Meeting Basic Human Needs, which set out many of the key elements. The strategy was also subsequently discussed at the UN and AIDS Program Guidance for FY 1980, and in the IBRD's World Development Report. This widespread discussion in turn has led to an evolution of thinking about basic needs and in particular the implications for assisting LDC implementation of the BHN approach. See page 2. The remainder of this paper details this evolution, focusing particularly on the relationship between the basic needs and growth. It then draws some general implications about development assistance programs designed to support LDC efforts. A separate paper, quote, a strategy for a more effective bilateral development assistance, quote, aid policy paper, March 1978, extends this analysis in the context of the bilateral assistance program. Begs the question, is there a BHN/growth dichotomy? Basic needs objectives have often been viewed as essentially separate and distinct from growth objectives. The DAC plenary in March 1977 dealt with recent changes in policy and program emphasis towards the objective of meeting basic human needs as against other aims such as promoting overall economic growth. Similarly, the DAC Secretariat wrote in June 1977, the BHN strategy strikes a balance between policies aimed at economic growth and poverty-oriented policies. In the same month, the OECD ministers affirmed that development cooperation should fulfill the dual purposes of growth of incomes and meeting basic needs of individuals in all developing countries, and announced their determination to direct, in cooperation with developing countries, a progressively larger share of their efforts to programs meeting human basic needs. Perception of BHN in both donor and recipient countries have frequent have frequently reflected. Wanted to make sure that this is actually recording my voice. It may not be. We're going to need to cut at 1:59 p.m. Properties, artist chat. Okay, yes. Just making sure because I'm not reading this again. I don't repeat myself. We're gonna go start from the top. So we're gonna restart page 2. All right. That'll just make it easier for the whoever. So we're restarting page 2, and don't expect this to happen again. Page 2. The remainder of this paper details this evolution, focusing particularly on the relationship between basic needs and growth. It then draws some general implications about development assistance programs designed to support LDC efforts. A separate paper, A Strategy for a More Effective Bilateral Assistance Program, Aid Policy Paper, March 1978, extends this analysis in the context of the bilateral assistance program. See, quote, A Strategy for a More Effective Bilateral Development Assistance Program, DAP, quote, begging the question, is there a BHN growth dichotomy? Basic needs and objectives have been viewed as essentially separate and distinct from growth objectives. Let's dissect this question. Is there a BHN over growth dichotomy? The basic human needs is being split from the growth of the human network. Let's analyze this 1977 report. Analyze, what do y'all say in America? Analyze. We will analyze this report. The DAC plenary in March 1977 dealt with recent changes in policy and program emphasis under the Carter administration towards the objective of meeting basic human needs as against other aims such as promoting overall economic growth. Similarly, the DAC Secretariat wrote in June 1977, the BHN strategy strikes a balance between policies aimed at economic growth and poverty-oriented policies. Let's reiterate. Similarly, the DAC Secretariat wrote in June 1977, the BHN strategy strikes a balance between policies aimed at economic growth and poverty-oriented policies. In the same month, the OECD ministers affirmed that development cooperation should fulfill the dual purposes of growth of incomes and meeting basic needs of individuals in all developing countries, and announced their determination to direct, in cooperation with developing countries, a progressively larger share of their efforts to programs meeting basic human needs. Perceptions of BHN in both donor and recipient countries have frequently reflected this view of development options in terms of a growth over BHN dichotomy. In this view, development programs, policies, and projects can be either BHN oriented or growth oriented, but not both. This fundamental misunderstanding has led to important problems, both conceptual and practical. First, it has tended to place artificially narrow constraints on programs and policies to be carried out in the name of BHN. This tendency has been reinforced by some interpretations of legislation and congressional directives to AID. These interpretations suggest that projects be justified in terms of their more or direct and exclusive impact on the well-being of the poor majority, e.g., direct food aid for poor groups, see the Thrive Food Network. We basically got a box that distributes food, can be parachuted anywhere in the world. This tendency has been reinforced by some interpretations of legislation and congressional directives to AID. These interpretations suggest that projects be justified in terms of their more or less immediate, direct, and exclusive impact on the well-being of the poor majority, e.g., direct food aid for poor groups, financial and technical assistance for low-cost health and nutrition. This, with the option of SARMs or not, can either give you full benefit of food with the added benefit of becoming superhuman, and we also teach how to use solar power to power your youth generation with blockchain. No matter where you are, you can be in the middle of the salt deserts. E.g., direct food aid for poor groups, financial and technical assistance for low-cost health and nutrition, basic education and family planning programs via Generation Z, directed to low-income families. Generation Z is a non-for-profit which teaches young children how to thrive in today's society. The inference, I don't know what this word means. The inference drawn by some has that, I would imagine it means interference, somewhat the same. The inference drawn by some has that these are BHN projects, in contrast to other projects that have substantial impact, which might, however, be eventual rather than immediate, indirect, or non-exclusive on the poor. The first category of projects clearly does not meet basic needs, but they are not the only way, nor are they necessarily the best way to achieve BHN objectives over time. The artificially narrow constraints imposed by acceptance of the BHN growth dichotomy can have important implications for project design, staffing, rate of disbursement, and style of relationships between donors and recipients. Under these constraints, projects tend to focus only at the local level, where specific programs and projects can be closely monitored and adjusted as needed to ensure their precise impact on the target population. However, such projects are usually laborious to design and difficult to implement, and there is a great scarcity of trained personnel in many LDCs who can implement the projects. Training must be undertaken. See the United States Navy's implementation in these LDCs, such as Djibouti. I will pull up now some population statistics, if I can find them on my computer. Okay, so this is one of the poorest places in the world. We're going to go here and help these people out first. See the red dots? That's where we go help. See out here in the middle of nowhere? That's where we're going to go. Bring the water from the White Nile to right there. As I said before, with the help of the Navy and other, we don't even really need them, but they are there already. But we also have, you've got the Army Corps, you've got the Salvation Army, you've got the Peace Corps, a lot of people. Such projects are usually laborious to design and difficult to implement. This is going to be back-breaking work for some people. Only for the people that want to do the back-breaking work. There's probably going to be like 10 to 20 back-breaking jobs. The rest of 100 jobs will be computers. But like some people have to be in the field. They got to be men too. I guess women can do it, but you might break your back. Institutional systems in these countries frequently are deficient, the opposite of efficient. But we're going to fix that and make them efficient. Institutional systems in these countries frequently are either deficient, non-existent, or geared to support the elite. Experience suggests that it takes several years to develop adequate institutions, including delivery systems. Activities of this kind typically requires significant numbers of foreign personnel to assist in implementation and on-the-job training of nationals during the entire life of the projects. And once foreign donors withdraw, these projects can generally succeed only if a sound overall policy framework exists and adequate institutional development has occurred. Let me show you how easy it is to drop a Thrive Pack full of food. One of these jars contains enough food paired with water and a shaker cup to feed one person for 33 meals, which is 11 days, 3 meals a day.
So you've got your own business, and you're doing everything you can to promote it.
My business
the
from
marketing
Google
doesn't
is
always have to
Thrive,
be so flashy.
but we're a little bit different. I sell bikes,
Google Ads,
but more
you can select
importantly,
your
we're
goal,
trying to save the world.
like getting more visits,
So,
and your ad will show up on Google,
example,
so you can advertise smarter.
that's literally not what I clicked. This is how you disperse the Thrive food, anything. That's literally all you do. Then it floats back down. So back to the report. We can set up these
performance, can make factories more efficient, and reduces our time to market.
for these people
As a result,
to
we
use.
consider additive manufacturing
They
to be a
can build
cornerstone of the
anything.
next industrial revolution.
Literally anything. They can print Bitcoin all
With
day.
additive,
You know what I mean?
it's really about
We
expanding
can
that
literally
design
print
space.
Bitcoin miners.
It promises to change the
This
traditional
is what we're going
paradigms
to
of how we
teach
approach
to the
creating
children
something.
that we're bringing this food to. Once we give them all
We've been using
food,
many
they'll
of
realize
today's
we're
additive
friends.
manufacturing processes
So
for over
realize
20
we're
years,
friends,
mainly for advanced
go back and
prototyping,
show them how
but
to get
only
rich
recently are we
with all
turning the
these
corner
things
toward
right
mass
here.
production. This has implications for nearly every industry, from
We're
lightweight,
updating
strong
the
metal parts
BHN
for
from
aerospace and automotive
1977 to
applications, to
2021
customized
with
medical
the Thrive
devices
network.
and consumer goods.
If you look at orthopedic implants like this one, they are relying on
After
bone to
this,
actually
we'll
grow
go back
into
to
the
the
surface of the
BHN.
device. And with additive manufacture, you can fine-tune the lattice structures so that it's more conducive to bone ingrowth.
We can really customize stuff for end users, which allows for a lot of freedom when designing those objects.
If you can imagine it, you can print it. It really opens up the door to new
Nobody's
possibilities that we
imagination
haven't
is
been able
more
to leverage
important than
before.
another person's imagination in the Thrive
In this
network.
course, we'll address the
Everybody
fundamentals,
that wants
applications,
to
and
be
implications of additive
taken
manufacturing.
seriously,
You'll walk
just
away with an
submits
in-depth
a
understanding of the
firm,
technology
hey, I want to
and
talk
why,
to
when, and how to use it.
me or anyone else,
We dive deep into how to design for
and we
additive
listen
manufacturing,
word for word to
including both
everything you
engineering
say
principles
with
and the digital
100%
workflow.
clarity.
You then apply what you've learned to an
And we
in-depth case
apply
study
what
where you can
you
choose
told
from a
us
library, either on design or
to
strategy and operations.
every possible asset
And you'll have the opportunity
in
to
the
use
world.
cloud-based CAD and computation tools that we built into the course.
Say you don't know how to use that, but you
Additive
got
is
an
gonna
idea,
change the way
well, tell someone who
engineers
knows how to
think
use it,
about
and they'll
their
do it for
jobs.
you.
It's going to change
that.
the way we think about production systems and engineering in general.
We cover a lot of ground in this course.
So I'm a
and seek to
social
balance breadth
engineer,
and depth.
but I have a
Now, the eventual
background in
implications of
particular
additive
physics.
manufacturing for design and production are far-reaching and probably beyond our current imagination. But it's still early, so now is the time to get started.
One technology we can share via solar power and crypto mining. I'm going to go back to DCC, the Development Coordination Committee policy paper. This is from revised 1980 from the Carter administration. I'm going to go back to page 5. Defining the basic needs approach in terms of patterns of growth still leaves open the question whether basic needs oriented growth results or does not result in lower overall GMP. Growth rates compared with other patterns of growth. There are arguments and examples to support both cases. The most compelling argument against such a trade-off is that since the abundant resource, I believe we may have missed a page here. We did. We're going back to page 2. You're going to restart from page 2. First, it has tended to place from the it being, we're going to use some calculus here, it being the fundamental misunderstanding between these two problems, the view is the it. View equals it here. The view that development program policies and projects can be either BHN oriented or growth oriented, but not both, is the it. That view is a fundamental misunderstanding. It has led to important problems, both conceptual and practical. The view of development programs, policies, and projects cannot be both BHN oriented and growth oriented together has caused these problems. First, it has tended to place artificially narrow constraints on programs and policies to be carried out in the name of BHN. This tendency has been reinforced by some interpretations of legislation and congressional directives to AID. These interpretations suggest that projects be justified in terms of their more or less immediate, direct, and exclusive impact on the well-being of the poor majority, e.g., direct food aid for poor groups, financial and technical assistance for low-cost health and nutrition, basic education and family planning programs directed to low-income families, etc. The inference drawn by some has been that these are quote-unquote BHN projects, in contrast to other projects that may have substantial impact, which might, however, be eventual rather than immediate, indirect, or non-exclusive on the poor. The first category of projects clearly does not first category of projects clearly does meet basic needs, but they are not the only way, nor are they necessarily the best way to achieve BHN objectives over time. The artificially narrow constraints imposed by acceptance of the BHN over growth dichotomy can have important implications for project design, staffing, rate of disbursement, and style of relationships between donors and recipients. Under these constraints, projects tend to focus only at the local level, where specific programs and projects can be closely monitored and adjusted as needed to ensure their precise impact on the target population. However, such projects are usually laborious to design and difficult to implement, as there is a great scarcity of trained personnel in many LDCs who can help implement the projects. Training must be undertaken. Institutional systems in these countries frequently are either deficient, non-existent, or geared to support the elite. Experience suggests that it takes several years to develop adequate institutions, including delivery systems. Activities of this kind typically require significant number of foreign personnel to assist in implementation and on-the-job training of nationals during the entire life of the projects, toda vida. And once foreign donors withdraw, these projects can generally succeed only if a sound overall policy framework exists and adequate institutional development has occurred. A second equally important problem, a second equally important problem is that the BHN growth dichotomy tends to remove criteria by which growth projects and programs ought to be appraised. The implication is that since BHN is that part of a development strategy that focuses on the poor, the growth element need not have any impact at all on the poor. Accordingly, a growth project, for instance an industrial project, can be implemented with little or no concern for its direct or indirect contribution to meeting basic needs through increased employment of unskilled labor or through securing adequate supplies of essential goods and services. The fact is that industrial projects can contribute to meeting basic needs in a variety of ways through direct effects on employment, through indirect effects on employment, e.g., a plant that produces cement for labor-intensive construction versus a 3D printer that can 3D print the entire warehouse and another 3D printer. Through direct supply of inputs essential to food production, e.g., fertilizer, or more indirectly by generating foreign exchange or crypto to finance food or other basic imports, e.g., manufacturers for export. However, appraising projects only in terms of their direct effects on the aggregate output and growth often result in inadequate appreciation of their potential impact on employment and incomes of the poor or on other indirect ways to promote basic human needs objectives. A third problem created by the BHN/growth dichotomy is that it tends to force many to false conclusion that developing countries must first grow and then meet basic needs. This has been the traditional view of the issue, since many officials in both developing and donor countries attach the highest priority to growth. They are unwilling to increase the share of scarce resources allocated to economic uses that are not perceived to have immediate and clearly positive implications for growth. Whereas, if these scarce resources are allocated to mining Bitcoin, it is clearly evident you will immediately grow your economy. They often regard pursuing basic human needs objectives as a welfare approach which directly provides food, shelter, health, and education to a large number of poor through income redistribution, like my taxes, financed in part by taxes on the non-poor and in part by foreign donors. Whereas mining crypto requires work, workers, labor, and creates their own economy. Consequently, many developing countries have been suspicious of developed country motives in promoting the BHN approach. Among other reasons, it is perceived as an alternative to their legitimate concerns for raising GND growth that would keep them in a position of economic inferiority. The goal of cryptocurrency is to use the sun, the water, the wind, the geothermal earth to work with your workers, mine your Bitcoin, mine your crypto if you make a new crypto, and bring economy anywhere in the earth, or technically on Mars too. It is clear that such a welfare approach is neither feasible nor appropriate. Therefore, some have retreated to the conventional wisdom that it is desirable to increase GNP first and then take care of the poor and their basic needs. This reasoning rests on the growth/BHN dichotomy. Since this dichotomy is false, the conclusion that countries must first grow and then meet their basic needs is a pitfall that needs to be avoided. BHN-oriented growth. In fact, the issue raised by a BHN strategy is not whether to focus on growth, but rather what kind of growth is to be achieved by the economic growth measured by a single number, your crypto, mine being Bitcoin. The The rate of increase in aggregate income and output, or gross national product, on the output side. This aggregate rate of increase reflects growth rates of production in various sectors. On the income side, Ethereum is the best way for y'all to make a new crypto or mine Ethereum if it's mineable. Use the Ethereum network to supply your LDC to become the richest network in the world. It is an average of growth rates of earned income of various population groups available in the Ethereum virtual machine. The basic needs approach is concerned with the composition of increases in both production and employment, and with distribution of increases in income among population groups, which are able to be helped by the EVM. Thus, growth and BHN objectives are not separate and distinct. Growth is, in fact, a vital component of a BHN development strategy, with the pattern of growth being the critical factor. A BHN pattern of growth is one in which the benefits of increased incomes and output are equitably distributed primarily by the growth process itself, rather than redistributed through tax transfer mechanisms. This process is most likely to succeed when the pattern of growth provides for fuller and more productive employment of human resources, including the poor, those who cannot meet their basic needs. A pattern of growth in which scarce capital is concentrated in only a few modern sectors that account for relatively little employment commonly results in skewed income distribution and tends to make little or no contribution to alleviating scarcity of essential goods or services. Every single transaction and movement of fiat currency and or cryptocurrency on the Ethereum virtual network is observable in real time and trackable by etherscan.io. Every single possible transaction in the world on the Ethereum virtual machine is right here. Every single one. It doesn't matter where you are in the universe. You could be on Mars or Jupiter. This will get here at the same time your ETH does. These people just moved. How much is ETH right now? $4,500. These people just moved about 10K. These people moved about 10K. These people are moving more. You see what I'm saying? These people are moving little bits amounts. This is the latest traction. This is the latest block. A block is a whole piece of Ethereum. Okay? You can see how it takes longer and longer and shorter. These are individual transactions. Okay? These people are sending money to people. Not, look, see how much little you can do? This is Harmony One Bridge. It tells you exactly where they're going. You can track all of this by everything. UFO Gaming, I'm gonna check that out. Uniswap, great company. PancakeSwap, another good company. MetaMask, key to all this. We're Thrive Company. I'll show you how to use MetaMask. This is my test wallet, so I obviously don't keep any Ethereum here because the whole internet knows the password to this wallet. People could literally send money here, and anyone in the internet that knows my password can take it. I made this wallet on a live stream. I don't know who was watching. Could have had 1 billion people watching me, so I don't put any money here myself. Anyone's welcome to fucking send me money. Sorry for excuse my language. Back to the DCC. We are here. Page 8 of 12 in the PDF. However, on the document, this is a typewriter document, is not page 8. For clarity. Defining the basic needs approach in terms of pattern of growth still leaves open the question whether basic needs oriented growth results or does not result in lower all GNP growth rates compared with other patterns of growth. There are arguments and examples to support both cases. The most compelling argument such a trade-off is that since the abundant resource in most LDCs is unskilled labor, emphasis on expansion of large-scale capital-intensive industry results in high rates of unemployment and underemployment of unskilled labor and consequently less than optimal growth in that a potentially productive resource is widely underutilized. The Ethereum virtual machine. Accordingly, the BHN approach, with stress on broadly based increases in productive employment as a means for alleviating mass poverty. See 3D printing. You can 3D print a factory in the middle of the desert, install a few crypto miners, mine Bitcoin, use Ethereum virtual machine, get your Ethereum going, get your economy going, print any products you want. It's up to your own brain and your company's brain at that point. Unless you want us to help, we'll help. Anyone will help. This is commendable on the grounds for efficiency as well as equity and should lead to high rates of growth in GNP. Arguments in favor of the existence of a trade-off are that technological advance, an important source of growth, is greater in modern capital-intensive sectors than large-scale projects, which may have little direct or indirect effect on meeting basic needs. This can be implemented relatively quickly and therefore lead to large gains in output, at least in the short run. However, the question of what such growth is supposed to accomplish in terms of more ultimate development objectives remains. The evidence from actual country experiences is also mixed. The examples of Korea and Taiwan are the most frequently cited cases of rapid growth and widespread satisfaction of basic needs. Sri Lanka is cited by those who contend the satisfaction of basic needs implies a substantial cost in terms of slower growth. Although Sri Lanka's 2% average annual per capita growth rate between 1960 and 1976 compares favorably with the 0.9% average for low-income countries and the 1.3% average for low-income Asian countries. Further, there is evidence that Sri Lanka could have grown more rapidly with no sacrifice in BHN performance had they employed a cryptocurrency platform at the time of 1976. The BHN approach offers two general criteria for appraising patterns of growth. These allow for considerable variety in the pattern of investment, sectoral priorities, and urban/rural emphasis in individuals' LDCs. First, a BHN pattern of growth should in most cases include rapid and broadly based increases in volume and productivity of employment. See rapid creation with 3D printing. It is conceivable that more wealthy countries, for example those with relatively large petroleum reserves, such as the United States of America, could rely on redistribution to raise the incomes of their poor, at least for a while. In most developing countries, however, the scope for redistribution is quite limited, and higher incomes for the poor can result only from increasing the share of the poor in overall growth increased and more productive employment. Second, the pattern of growth in output should provide for, but not be limited to, adequate supplies of goods and services, food, shelter, education, health services, etc., that are more or less essential to individual well-being. Much of this quote-unquote consumption is more accurately characterized as investment in human capital and thus can contribute to longer-term GNP growth and through increased labor productivity. A A BHN development strategy can thus be viewed as a particular extension of general strategies that promote growth with equity. It recognizes that growth in earned income of the poor is vital, but that such income growth must be matched by increased availability of goods and services that satisfy basic needs. Particularly in low-income countries, this means that LDCs and donors need to be concerned also about increases in production, supply, and accessibility to the poor of the goods and services that are essential to well-being. Implications for foreign assistance. The criteria that can be used to assess crypto patterns of growth have concrete policy implications, but they also leave room for substantial variation among countries in patterns of production and allocation of foreign assistance. Accordingly, no sector can be excluded a priori as a legitimate target for economic assistance under a BHN strategy. On the other hand, this does not imply that economic assistance needs to be extended to all sectors. The sectoral choice is one that has to be made on a country-by-country basis, taking into account such factors as donor capabilities, relative sectoral needs, the importance of particular development constraints, etc. Whether a given sector is suitable for economic assistance depends on how substantial the linkages are between assistance to the sector and achievement of BHN objectives compared with alternatives uses of assistance. These linkages can be analyzed according to both income, employment, effects, and production. With respect to employment and income, all sectors employ labor. Most of the poor, especially in low-income countries, are located in rural areas and depend directly or indirectly on agriculture for their livelihood. While they can maintain their lifestyle of agriculture, this farmland is premium for solar, wind, and geothermal farming, as well as crypto farming, as well as 3D printing warehouses. So examine a barn house. A large 3D printer able to print cars could be installed into a single barn house and give one person's family an entire electrical vehicle assembly line. There is no presumption in a BHN approach that agriculture is the only productive sector worthy of assistance. However, increasing the productivity of the poor engaged in agriculture is only one approach to the employment problem. Another is expansion of labor-intensive industry, especially small-scale enterprises such as Thrive, a co-partner of Alphabet, which tends to promote a substantial expansion in employment. This option is particularly relevant in middle-income countries, where a larger portion of the poor is likely to be located in urban areas. There are other examples. Activities that employ the landless poor, such as public work programs, can contribute to both employment and to the creation of needed infrastructure. Thrive's suggestion, Thrive trademarked by Alphabet and Google, suggestion for this program for the landless poor, who are people who do not own land on the Earth or Mars, is that we produce a system of social work for the lowest level jobs such as landscape maintenance, trash pickup, cleaning, recycling, all these such things. And they will run off of government subsidized Thrive electrical vehicles. Each Thrive electrical van has all the necessary tools to teach a human being how to work. They are not meant to be permanent jobs. If you want a permanent job, you have to earn the foreman position with 4 years of dedicated experience to that one particular job. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be a landscaper your whole life. If you do 4 years at $20 an hour under the Thrive program, eventually you'll be the foreman, and then you run the truck. There's 3 to 4 people in each truck. This goes for street sweepers, all these different public utilities that we need. 8. Certain sectors may provide inputs essential to production processes that employ unskilled labor without themselves being labor intensive, e.g., fertilizer. These are suitable targets for foreign assistance under a BHN approach, provided the contribution to employment through indirect, profitable, and substantial compared with the alternatives of foreign existence. C. Activities that provide productive employment depend on various types of infrastructure. Improving infrastructure, which ultimately makes a significant contribution to labor-intensive production, is an appropriate use of foreign assistance under a BHN approach. There is no presumption that this infrastructure must help only the poor, so long as the benefits to the poor are demonstrably larger than the benefits to the elite. On the production side, the obvious approach is to allocate domestic resources and foreign assistance to producing food, water, and sanitation, housing, health, and education, etc. However, adequate production of these basic goods and services will depend on material inputs, fertilizer, building materials, furnishings, public services, agricultural research and extension, credit facilities, and trained personnel such as teachers and paramedics. Thus, foreign assistance may be needed beyond the core sectors. In some countries, the best approach to adequate food supply or fertilizer supply may be to produce and export something else and then import food, meaning it may be cheaper for you to build a car, sell a car, and import food than to make your own food. Under certain circumstances, foreign assistance that supports such production could help achieve important BHN objectives. These examples suggest that a variety of sectors, not just a few core sectors, may be important in achieving basic needs objectives. In fact, the bulk of the world's poor are in low-income countries where poverty is pervasive, and the problem of meeting basic needs is one of economy-wide proportions. Therefore, since the overall pattern of growth is key to the success of a BHN approach, assistance may in some cases be most effective in BHN terms when directed towards the economy as a whole rather than towards a specific sector. Effectiveness in such cases depends crucially on the institutional and policy setting of the country. Where there are supportive of BHN objectives, where there is support of BHN objectives, assistance provided as a general resource transfer rather than targeted on a certain sector can effectively further these objectives. Where countries are prepared to make structural reforms that will lead to a pattern of growth conducive to increased satisfaction of basic needs, i.e., one characterized by rapid gains in employment and increased availability of essential goods and services. Assistance that encourages and supports these reforms serves the purpose of meeting basic needs. Because the BHN approach is concerned with sustainable improvements in living standards among the poor, the impact on the poor of some policies, programs, and projects can be longer than the immediate, indirect, rather than longer term. Let me reread this paragraph. Because the BHN approach is concerned with sustainable improvements in living standards among the poor, the impact on the poor of some policies, programs, and projects can be longer term rather than immediate, indirect rather than direct, and non-exclusive rather than exclusive. So long as this impact is verifiable and ultimately significant, there is no reason why foreign assistance must be focused only on direct impact activities. The key condition is that developing countries follow a development plan that is essentially consistent, eternally consistent, and reflects the values and priorities of the population. This can be implemented by their institutions and documents the sorts of linkages described above between the elements of the plan and the BHN objectives. This permits areas of emphasis for certain donors but does not unduly limit them. However, where donors support aid activities in which the impact of the poor on the poor can only be indirect and long term, it is important that a greater effort be made to assure that both the overall policies pursued and the structure of internal institutions will permit the poor to participate in the benefits of growth. Otherwise, there is a danger of reverting to some of the unsuccessful trickle-down experiences of the past. This concludes the updated 2021 as of November 14th, 2:40 p.m. evolution of the basic human needs concept via the Thrive network in the Ethereum virtual machine with the help of Satoshi Nakamoto. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Stay tuned for the next lecture, and as always, thrive on.